And speaking about playing against other MLS teams, well, we're talking about Riqui Puig here, officially joining the LA Galaxy. Rafa, everyone who has listened to this show for the last 2 years probably knows where I'm going to go with this conversation. But let's do the details first. I'm going to let you weigh in on his Barcelona time. So the 22-year-old Puig signed a 3-year deal with the LA Galaxy of MLS. Barca will get a very small fee, not worth talking about. They are actually even counting this as a free transfer. That's how small the fee is, with a buyback clause of 10 million euros. And Barcelona could receive up to 50% of any future transfer. Those are the interesting numbers to me about the whole Barcelona side of this, where they're basically just banking on this player having, an outrageous time in the US. And I don't mean like in LA, off the field. I mean like on the field before you slip there for Riqui Puig. But of what has come out about him lately, again, this is also what comes out in the media is always questionable as well. But Riqui Puig has, in a way, built up a little bit of a reputation, as well as, just perfect timing on this leak. Someone was sitting on that about his words about Ferran Torres and Pep Guardiola, basically saying, hey, Pep Guardiola doesn't even play him. What do we need Ferran Torres about? I think that is the mark of a player, I think, bitter about his own playing time. A reminder, too, that he only played, 474 total minutes in the 2021-22 season after, we'll always have those 90 minutes against Atletico Madrid. For those that, I believe in Riqui Puig like everybody else. Go back to it. I was like, hey, the future of the midfields, it's okay. I don't think I ever made the Iniesta comparisons or anything like that. I never jumped on that. But, I always thought he was capable of elite line breaking abilities. And I think he still can do those things, but it's a matter of what he'll do in MLS. So before I do my MLS thing, Rafa, Riqui Puig's time at Barcelona, did it end the way that you always thought it would?
No, because I didn't think he would go to MLS. All due respect to MLS, the league, and its players. But I think this was, in my opinion, I liked Riqui Puig. But I think the problem was, and not only with the Riqui Puig, but some Masia players, especially being Catalan, like I would say the Sergi Samper syndrome, the same thing. People, comparisons are a B. And just like Sergi Samper was known as the next Busquets, Riqui Puig sometimes was labeled as like the next Xavi or something like that. And I think that was, from the get-go, not good for him. And then I think to a certain point, he was also used as a political pawn. We know that Barcelona is really political, whether it's the side of Laporta, Cruyff, Guardiola, or the other side, Núñez, Bartomeu, Roussel, Toni Freixa. We know that. So while Riqui Puig was coming up, the guys in charge weren't like that much. That being Bartomeu, then at the time, Valverde. I'm not going to say Setien because he actually got quite a few minutes under Setien. But then Koeman came in and shut the door on him. And everybody was like, oh, Riqui Puig needs to play. Koeman this, Koeman that. And then this is where I'm going to criticize our fandom to a certain extent. When Xavi came in, Xavi didn't give him minutes either. And then all those people that were really critical of Bartomeu, of Valverde, of Koeman, didn't say a single thing when he wasn't getting those minutes under Xavi. And to me, that kind of sums up the problem with Riqui Puig's career in Barcelona. For whatever reason, whether you agree with me that he was used, in my opinion, as a quote-unquote political pawn in a way of like, oh my God, this great La Masia talent, they're throwing it away. Bartomeu, Valverde, Koeman, yada, yada. To me, if he hadn't gotten those comparisons and being labeled as like, honestly, like the La Masia savior and the need of us having like somebody from La Masia being a great midfielder and whatnot, to me, if he would have ran a normal course, maybe expectations wouldn't have been so high with Riqui Puig that we wouldn't have been so. It wouldn't have gotten to this point. Maybe he would still be with the team. Maybe he would still be playing in Europe. But it's like a mess, like a spaghetti with sauce and meat. Like it's just such a mess that, to me, that's kind of what defines Riqui Puig's career. Like maybe he wasn't. So I'm not saying Riqui Puig is bad. I think Riqui Puig is good, and hopefully he does great in MLS with the LA Galaxy. But I don't think that he is as good as maybe he was thought of, whether that's the fault of a certain sector in our fandom or whether that was more down to the media trying to create this aura around Riqui Puig being from La Masia, being Catalan. That always helps. So I think it's a perfect mix of a little bit of everything, the concoction of why Riqui Puig never got career at Barcelona, never quite took off like we kind of thought it would to a certain point.
Yeah, I mean, I looked back at my notes in the last 5 years. I keyworded just Riqui Puig, and I went through some of those shows where I had all of these notes about, we're talking about Puig again. And for about the last year or two now, I think part of the reason why originally, now we're talking 2 years prior, when I first in 18 or 19, I made this YouTube video about, the next up, right? I had a juvenile, a juvenile A forward. His name was Ansu Fati or something. He was like 16 years old. I had him on that list. Riqui Puig is on that list, but Puig was 20 at the time, or 20 or 19 at the time. Yeah, it would have been 19. He was 19 at the time, right? And we'd think at 19, 20 years old, that's when this kid is improving. That's when we're going to see him figure those things out. Because my criticism of him and the issue why Koeman didn't play him, the issue why Xavi didn't play him, his issue is not only defensive positioning. It's not about defending. Like, people think it's all about like the size and jumping into a tackle. And that was always the argument, and that you watch him in the lower levels, even where things are even more roughly and tumbly. The problem about the lower level is that those attackers and those midfielders, they don't crush you. They don't destroy you for making mistakes. And when I say rest defense, I mean Riqui Puig, especially in Barca's system, he'll attack in a way and he'll get himself in a position, or he'll make an extra touch that he doesn't need to, because yes, he has that final ball. He really does. It's an extremely good resource to have when you are able to play these through balls, the diagonal balls, the way that Riqui Puig does. His control, his technical ability is just, it's awesome. It is Barcelona caliber. But when he makes his move, or again, takes that extra touch, or isn't up to match speed and ready to make those decisions, then he leaves Busquets on an island, or he leaves whoever it may be on an island, and he is not prepared when he makes a mistake, or Dembele gives the ball away, or I don't know why I said Dembele, but when one of his teammates, Ansu, when somebody gives the ball away, he's not where he needs to be to get the ball back. And it's not that he's not willing to fight and he doesn't have the desire for it. Like, yeah, he doesn't really win aerial duels and he's not really great in a tackle, but he does enough where it's not supposed to hurt you. Not similar to Pedri, but not that dissimilar from Pedri. I mean, look at how tall both of those two players are, right? And how much they weigh. It's like 10 pounds and an inch separate them or something like that. Like, they're very similar, even though it just looks like they're entirely different players. It doesn't help that he tucks it in, but the shirt, I mean. So for Puig, the issues with him have kind of been compounded through the years, and now we blink and he's 22. And I think the reason why at 19, everybody, including me, wanted him to be next was because we had seen Carlos Aldamuy. It didn't really work out. And you mentioned Sergio Zamper, but it's all those midfielders. Sergio Roberto, remember, there was a stretch there when it was Montoya and Sergio Roberto and Marc Bartra, and they had the last to push through. And so for all of us who were saying, La Masia, that has to be, like, that's got to fill in the bench. To me, he was never, and I never touted him as the next something. It's that he was going to be one of the 25 players good enough to play for Barca's first team. I do the same thing with Iñaki Peña. I go, is Iñaki Peña ever going to be the starter and goalkeeper at Barcelona? Probably not. But in a pinch, if you need 6 to 7 to 10 games from Iñaki Peña this season, he's going to give you that. He can give you that. And so, I mean, that's the level. That's what we wanted from Riqui Puig. And that didn't happen, because you're talking about the Puig stance, like the ones that were christening him that he was going to be the next answer in midfield. But no. Now, the MLS thing, here we go. I think he could really shine in MLS, and that's what most people are saying. Of course, MLS, he's going to dominate that. If you go from FC Barcelona to MLS, you are going to dominate. Because as I said, breaking lines is a skill that will translate. Those fantastic through balls are going to be great. But I watch MLS, as everybody knows, one of the things I do on the side. And when I say side, I mean, another one of the things that I do for full discretion is I watch a lot of MLS for different kinds of work. And so I can tell you that his limited positional versatility, it concerns me in Major League Soccer. Like, the players that are like him with those attacking abilities, that mean that final ball, you have Lucas Elrayan, you have Emmanuel Reynoso up in Minnesota, Nico Ladero for Seattle, has been doing it for a long time. they can all slot in rather out wide, and they can play, they play quite a free role because they all have protection, right? And they all have the tactical sense to know when they have coverage. And Puig has struggled both in getting in wide positions and knowing when he doesn't have coverage. So to me, looking around Major League Soccer, and I'm trying to say, who can Puig try to emulate? Who can he be? And Ryan Gold, now that's a name. Remember that name? We're going back to the Scottish wonderkin from what is FIFA Manager, whatever, or the old FIFA games. That was Scotland's greatest big hope. What was like 7-8 years ago when he was 17, 18 years old, whatever. So at a young age, he's this prodigy, goes to Portugal, Sporting CP, but never breaks through. He kind of gets completely forgotten. He spends 4 years on loan, always struggling for time. Then last year at 25, he moves to Vancouver, of all places, to reinvent himself. He's an attacking midfielder that I think is the archetype for what Puig could be in MLS. And since he's only 22, that being Puig, unlike many of the other contemporaries who play his position at MLS, they go out for and they spend money on, those guys are all 25, 26, 27 and come in to run a team. Puig is still 22. So I would also tell people to kind of let this kid play a season of full football again. He's not played a full season of football in 3 years since playing under Cristiano Pimienta with Barca B. So, I mean, I think this is a move that is being made to raise his stock. So if he succeeds, he'll be right back to Europe with a big fee. And due to the Euro spots on squads in Europe, I understand the argument too, that it's a bit unusual for European talents to move to a league like MLS to develop. Totally fair. But if he was South American and had these abilities, right, this move is right in line with players like Jose Cifuentes of LAFC, Thiago Almada, who Barcelona fans and those who are looking at teenagers saying, hey, there's this kid in Argentina. Ezequiel Barco was the same way in the Premier League. They were really looking at that kid. Both of them go to Atlanta United to figure things out. And it hasn't worked out for Barco, right? And so it wasn't a sure thing. Alan Velasco, who was supposed to go to Crystal Palace, or whatever it was, but he was linked to some of the mid-table teams. I think it was Wolverhampton in the Premier League. Instead, he goes to FC Dallas. And Tyus Magno of NYCFC was getting looked at and scouted by Chelsea and by Arsenal. And he goes to NYCFC and is now part of Citigroup. And listen too, Mike Bernardeschi and Lorenzo Insigne, two players still in their prime. They just moved to Toronto FC literally in the last 3 weeks. So, I hope Puig dominates from day one. But even watching, Hector Herrera, who's now with the Houston Dynamo, who just moved from Atletico Madrid to the Houston Dynamo, he can even tell you from the last few weeks, his team just got blitzed by like 6 goals or something with him as a starting midfielder. MLS can take some time to getting used to, whether you're a young player or whether you're Frank Lampard. Goodness gracious, right? So it's like this whole retirement MLS thing is not the case. That's not what MLS is becoming. If anything, they're becoming a place where 18 to 23, 24-year-olds are raising their stock and being sold to Europe. It just is this rare occasion where you have a kid for FC Barcelona coming to the US to raise his stock, basically reinvent himself as if he was 19 again, and then head back over in 2, 3, 4 years time to play for who? Villarreal or Valencia or Levante, even whoever, I always pick the Valencian team, but there you go, or Espanyol, you know what I mean? So we'll see what happens to Riqui Puig. I have no idea how this is going to go. I don't think MLS usually sees players like him sign for the team, not only in the Europe thing, his age, as well as this interior midfielder who doesn't really get up and down. Like that's the thing that MLS interior midfielders do. They can go box to box. And I would never say that Riqui Puig can go all the way to his own box. So that was the whole thing about Riqui Puig and MLS. Rafa, give me the last word on Riqui Puig. We'll move on.
Again, to me, and I think a lot of people, I wouldn't say, because I think, again, I agree with you. Like his through balls are amazing. He's basically wasn't as good as maybe he was cut out to be by the Riqui Puig stands. But I think that's what happened. That maybe this kid was, well, now he's not a kid. He's 22, but he was so politicized in a way because of what I talked about earlier, like the Riqui Puig stance, which then had a hidden agenda because of who was the coach at the time, who was the president at the time. That a lot of people like me, I wouldn't say we're fed up with Riqui Puig, but I was like, dude, like, I think he should have gotten more minutes than what he got entirely, especially under Koeman. But at the same time, it was like, dude, I'm not a coach. We may think we are, but we're not. If Valverde didn't give him any minutes, Setien gave him a little bit of minutes, but whatever.
Everyone has said Setien was not a good manager.
Exactly.
Every person has said that.
Exactly. Then Koeman comes in, doesn't give him minutes. You may have hated Koeman for whatever reason, this or that. But then Xavi comes in. Freaking Xavi Hernandez, probably one of the greatest midfielders in history or the greatest midfielder in history. And he's seen Riqui Puig daily, and he's not giving him minutes. It's like, dude, like, we got to come to a point where, like, maybe he's not what we thought he was going to be. So let's roll it back a little bit, or maybe a lot. And again, it is what it is. I think that's just, it's a bigger problem. It's what I'm trying to get at, that maybe we get fixated because of the media themselves, especially the Catalan media, who tend to label these up-and-coming Catalan kids from La Masia, and we set the bar so high up that when they don't get to that bar, for whatever reason that may be, then we're like, oh my God, he's going to MLS. So it's like, let's just relax. That's my, let's just relax.
Well, yeah, because I know what's going to really grind my gears, and that's that when people are going to be speaking about this move, like if he quote unquote fails or struggles in MLS, that means that he stinks, because obviously there's that connotation that MLS is such a step down. MLS must stink. Therefore, Riqui Puig is going to stink. I'm telling you that MLS is a fine league. Like, no, it's not La Liga or the Premier League, but it's a fine league with good players in it and quality players in it who are either have succeeded in Europe or are going to be or going to in the future rather succeed in Europe, like again Miguel Almiron, who I hope gets a move from Newcastle away. But there are players that have succeeded and will succeed coming to and fro MLS, and so it's going to be a lot of either you have to disparage MLS, or again, if he dominates, it's again disparaging MLS, because that means MLS stinks, because this kid who was on the fringes of Barcelona that couldn't get a minute is now dominating MLS. So it is really a lose-lose situation for those who don't, a win-win situation for those who don't watch MLS, because they can just, toss it off anyway.